Hello everyone, it's Tabor again. Welcome to GreenCritiq for another review. This time we're going to be looking at The Little Mermaid 2023, the latest live action film adapted by Disney. I'm going to start off by saying that I did watch this film and it wasn't the worst film I've ever seen, but I was left completely underwhelmed. Let's go into it. First of all, the number one thing that I will say is Hailey Bailey was okay. I didn't have a problem with her in terms of her singer. She can really sing. This girl has got a good pair of lungs. Absolutely nothing wrong with her ability to sing. Her ability to act and the whole race swap on Ariel being black. I admit I questioned the decision why it was done, but it wasn't the thing that really bothered me about the film. I think with a lot of these live action movies that have come out, whether it be Aladdin, The Lion King, I've just found them to be a lot more hollow and shells of their former glory. So for example, Aladdin and The Lion King, although they did very well at the box office, they didn't really hit the mark in my opinion. And I think what I really have a problem with is there seems to be a lot of emphasis on people watching the original. Now what I mean by that is if I'm watching a movie, it doesn't matter what it is, especially if it's meant to be like a live adaptation of an original classic, you've got to make sure that the film holds up on its own. You've got to pretend that there was no classic, and the story has got to be cohesive, and the actual actors and characters have got to treat this as if it's new. I just find that a lot of these adaptations are depending too much on audiences being familiar with the originals, and it just seems to be lazy writing. I think with The Little Mermaid in particular, I was very underwhelmed with Ursula. I thought the nothing against the actress that played her, but I just didn't find her menacing. I didn't find her witty like the original performance in the 1989 version. Yes, they definitely cut the music down to make the lyrics more suitable for today's... I hate it when they do things like that. You know, you should always... Art should be separate from culture. Art should be separate from politics. Unless you're actually making a story about politics and culture, or it's a documentary on politics or culture. Yes, they did change the lyrics in some of Ursula's Poor Unfortunate Souls song. They definitely made some changes for Kiss the Girl song. And yeah, I didn't really appreciate the Eric literally just being completely helpless in the whole film. He didn't even save the day at the end. In the original 1989 version of The Little Mermaid, it's Eric who kills Ursula by slamming the ship into her, whereas of course today it had to be Ariel who did that, which really just changed the dynamic of the whole film. It just didn't feel the same. I really didn't like what that did to the story, because the whole thing with King Triton, and again, I felt one thing about the 89 version is you really felt the love of King Triton for his daughters, and especially Ariel. And when he loses his mind when he finds out that he saved Eric from drowning, he goes crazy and destroys everything, and then he has a moment of regret. But he's trying to guide her and trying to warn her that these people are bad people. And it never really gets through to her, and she goes off and meets Ursula. It just feels a little bit more stronger, the character development in the animation, whereas I found the relationship with King Triton and Ariel in the 2023 live adaptation was just lacking. It was just hollow. And because Eric didn't kill Ursula, there was no real reason as to why King Triton would all of a sudden be happy that she's marrying a human. It just didn't feel classy, and this is where you got to be very careful. If you want to make a live adaptation, it's clearly that Disney are doing this for money, right? But if you want to make a live adaptation, you've got to really consider the whole story arc and understand why things were done originally the way they were. The other issue I had was the pacing of the film. I mean, we see this all the time today, and the live adaptations are probably the best example because they've got something before in the 1980s and 1990s that we can compare with. The pacing of a film is one of the most important things. Let's have a look at this example. I will give credit to the Critical Drinker for pointing this out, but he makes a very good point. If we watch the two Ghostbuster movies side by side, so the original from 1984 and the 2016 film, So in the 1984 film, we have a 30-second scene in the elevator with them talking about their protein packs and all the stuff we need to understand about them and why they're dangerous. Whereas the 2016 film goes on this 5-minute journey of showing the same, or trying to explain the same message, but using so much more time to do it. They need to treat screen time like rationed water. They need to make sure that every second counts. I think The Little Mermaid, the 1989, is a very good story. You know, world building, it does a really good job in world building. It does a very good job in expressing who are the villains, who are the characters, which characters have conflicts, who are the best friends, who are the close friends, and where the story is going. We have an idea. It's very well done, and it's done within, 90 minutes. Whereas the new one is done in excess of a couple of hours, and it adds more things to it, but we don't get anything extra. We get a couple of extra songs, a little bit of backstory about Eric, which was appreciated, I admit. But probably the biggest crime of this film was the stuff they omitted. And it's not the changing in the lyrics, it's the chef scene with Sebastian. This scene in the 1980s was one of my favourite scenes of The Little Mermaid, and I was really curious on how they were going to do this in the new film. And I admit I was gravely disappointed that they literally took that whole scene out. As for the supporting actors, I found them a little bit hollow as well. I wasn't really impressed with any character in this adaptation at all, to be fair. I did try to like it, I did try and give it a go, but it just felt like all the extra time they put in didn't really add to the overall context of the story. Now, how do I feel about The Little Mermaid on its own as a film standing on its own, ignoring that there was something else before it back in the 80s? I think as a film it is somewhat entertaining. I wouldn't have chosen to go and see it, but I wanted to do this review just to give other people an idea of what I think. I think it has a lot of holes, and I think it does depend heavily on its predecessor. So for that reason, I will give it a reasonable score of a 6 out of 10. I think as a film, it passes, the entertainment aspect, but it's definitely not something I'd be dropping everything to go and see. I think Hailey Bailey really has a strong voice. She can really sing. As an actor, I wasn't convinced all the time. I didn't mind the chemistry she had with her co-star who played Eric, and I thought they had enough chemistry to make that be a little bit more electrifying. But I felt it was just missing a lot of the mark. So this is why I give it a 6 out of 10. I will give it a pass, as I will continue to rate other films and documentaries. Anything with a 6 is literally me saying, if you got nothing better to do in your life, then give it a go to kill some time, but I wouldn't lose sleep over not seeing this film. You're better off watching the original with some popcorn and some friends who actually enjoyed the original, and maybe let this one silently disappear, because it certainly won't be one of those films we remember in another 5 or 6 years. Thank you for listening. Hopefully this review gives you some context on whether or not to see it. I'll be back next time with more film reviews.